Hi everyone, my name's Sert. I'm codependent. Firstly, thank you for the meeting, and thank you for the opportunity to share. It's been a long time since I've done a chair, so yeah, it's really nice. It's really nice to be here and to be with all of you guys. Yeah, step A. Um, Made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. Yeah, I mean, in terms of the steps, you've got the big ones, that you've got the four and the nines, which are like the big ones, and then obviously all of the steps in between that don't feel too big or didn't to me. And this was definitely one of those. This was definitely one of those steps that actually I I mean, my experience in for a lot of the steps before doing them was a lot of anxiety and actually working the program and working the steps. And I wasn't actually that anxious about step A before I started doing it. And when I did start doing it, I realized that there was really no reason to be anxious about step A. Having done my step four, I had I thought I had a clear idea of the list, and I'd broken it up into different categories, and it's family and friends and colleagues and all sorts. And I remember my process with all of my steps was to sit down with my sponsor, and before and after the step, so starting from step one, we'd sit down and we'd kind of work out our method that we were going to use to work the steps. And he'd give me his experience, strength, and hope. And we'd done that, from one to seven. That was the process. And then I remember we got to step eight, and I told him, like, yeah, I know it. I've got a list, and I'm going to start with this person. I'm going to start there. I'm going to start with family. I'm going to start with friends. And I remember he sort of looked at me a little bit in shock. And he was like, okay, that's great. And I remember him saying to me, but what about yourself? And what about your higher power? And that just threw me. It completely threw me, because I thought, well, what do you mean? Like, I mean, make amends to myself, that just seemed like a completely foreign concept. I was so ready, and part of my codependency, like, really, it's almost I was almost going into step eight with my codependent hat on, like overly ready to apologize, overly ready to accept all my wrongdoings and make amends, and overly ready to fix and people please situations. And it hadn't dawned on me for a split second that the first person that I needed to make amends to was myself. And as I say, it was only in that moment that my sponsor had shared with me that the thought even crossed my mind. So I had to go away and revise my strategy, which was a humbling experience. But I now, in hindsight, realize just how important it was to be able to make the amends to myself. And actually thinking about it right now, it's only with a lot of time under my belt do I realize really why that was so important. Because at the time, I don't necessarily think I realized why it was so important. I did it because my sponsor had told me that that's what I needed to do. And me being, the diligent, good, codependent, wanted to make my sponsor happy. But really, I'm very lucky. I've got a great sponsor, and he was guiding me in such a beautiful direction, and that was the direction of making amends to myself first and foremost. And I realized that part of that was about repairing the relationship with myself first and foremost, being able to humbly make amends to myself and my higher power. And before I was able to do that, then, I wasn't ready to make amends to other people. And those amends wouldn't necessarily have been earnest or honest. They would have just been me going through the motions of the steps. So I really had to take a step back from my strategy and really get spiritual, and bring higher power into the practice, which again, it makes so much sense to me now. I've recently celebrated 5 years in this program, and I've got so much clarity around my recovery. But if I'm completely honest, at the time, I didn't have the clarity that I do now around why it was so important to make amends to myself. And as I say, it's the beginning of the start of a new relationship with myself. In my relationship with myself now is very different, having been in this program for 5 years. I owe this program so much. My life has completely changed, and my relationships have completely changed because of this program. And first and foremost, the relationship with myself has completely changed. I've learned self-love, self-respect, compassion for myself. And that isn't to say that I do that perfectly or that I get it right every single day. Of course, I still make mistakes, and I'm a work in progress. But I really, really, really do understand why it's so important to have a healthy relationship with myself, and why it's so important to fill my own cup and to look after my own needs and to parent myself. I can say hand on heart that I am now, I am and can be my own spiritual parent because of this program. And that is because I have a much better relationship with both myself as I am today and all of the other parts of me, all of the other Serts, the inner child. And for me, there's not one inner child. There's many, many different versions. There's the 3-year-old, there's the 5-year-old, there's the 8-year-old, there's the 16-year-old. And I now have a loving relationship, one that I work on every day. It's like a cup that I have to fill every day. But before this program and before working these steps, and I guess before working step 8, I didn't have that. And I came in, and it still took me a while. And listen, for me, I know that it's all on higher powers' time. Everything works on higher powers' time, much to my dismay and much to my annoyance and much to my frustration a lot of the time, because there's a codependent part of me that still wants to control everything and still wants everything done on my time. I know that higher power loves me, and higher power guides me, and higher power supports me, and so I am where I need to be today. And it took me as much time as it needed to take for me to learn the lessons, and ultimately to have a better relationship with myself. And I didn't realize it at the time. I came into this program because I was in a relationship, and it was very tumultuous. It was very dysfunctional, and I came in, and it was a romantic relationship, and the previous romantic relationship I had was the same, maybe not as dysfunctional, very codependent. But I came into this program because I thought it was going to help me with my relationships with others, and in particular, my romantic relationships. I wasn't even thinking about the relationship with myself. wasn't even thinking about that for a split second, because I didn't value it. I didn't realize it was something that I had to work on. And over time, you know, the more meetings I went to, the more literature I read, the more fellows I befriended, you know, just the more recovery I got under my belt. You know, it became very obvious to me that the most important relationship that I need to repair is the one with myself. And step 8 was really, now I think about it, was, you know, all of the steps, of course, you know, there's a beautiful magical alchemy that works through these steps, you know, and they're so beautifully intrinsically linked, even when they don't feel like they are sometimes, you know. And they can feel really difficult. I remember being really troubled by working, particularly step 4, you know. And by the time I made it to step 8, I thought, you know, the hardest part of it was done. You know, and I say it with a big smile on my face now, but it wasn't, you know, that's just one part. It's not necessarily the hardest, but, you know, step 8, as I say, the start of step 8 for me was really about making amends to myself, you know, acknowledging my codependent behaviors and patterns, acknowledging how and why those things had become what they were, why I had behaved the way that I had, why I had the relationships that I had up until that point, and just offering myself love and compassion, you know. And then came my amends to my higher power, you know, which in of itself was a difficult one, because even I think back then my relationship with my higher power has changed a lot now. But I grew up with an idea, you know, with quite a religious idea of what a higher power was. And that high power could be quite punitive, you know? And in making my amends to my higher power, there was a little bit of that left over, that, you know, my higher power was angry with me. And it was something that I had to work on through making amends to higher power, that I realized that, you know, my higher power loves and accepts me fully, wholly, completely as I am, no mistakes. And, you know, higher power acknowledged my amends, but higher power certainly wasn't going to punish me for anything that I had done in the past, you know. And that was something quite beautiful. That there was a lot of healing in that, you know. There was a lot of healing in both making the amends to myself and then making the amends to my higher power. And then slowly, you know, I'd gone through a list, and I'd made my list, and I went through it with my sponsor. And, you know, the list was quite long and the list was quite extensive. And my sponsor and I have a really good relationship. Very blessed. I'm very, very fortunate to have the sponsor that I do. And, you know, he knows a lot about me, and he knows a lot about my recovery, my codependency, the whys, the whens, the wheres. You know, he looked at a lot of the list, and, you know, he was like, okay, well, how do you want to do this? You know, what form do you want this to take? You know, and I wanted to make these big grand gestures to people, you know, sort of over egging the pudding. And, you know, again, we sort of spoke about it, and I remember it vividly. We were in my garden, and it was a beautiful day, and he was just like, I don't think you need to do that. You know, I think you need to keep it really simple, you know, because I wanted to make this massive meal out of it. And I trust my sponsor. I trust him wholly. You know, I really feel that's a relationship given to me by my higher power. And so I took I took it on, and I simplified things, because in over egging the pudding and making these grand gestures, there was an element of self-flagellation, of self-criticism still going in, holding on to the idea like, okay, I've been codependent. These are my codependent characteristics and traits, and these are how they've affected my relationships. So I really, really need to make amends, real big amends. And I realized that that wasn't the case, that in and of itself, making a list and making amends is such a big step. It's something a lot of people won't do in their lives, Yeah, it didn't need to be this grand gesture. It just needed to be something direct, clear, and something that felt right to me, and something that felt spiritual and felt humble. So, I went away and I revised my strategy, and I revised who and how I would make amends to. And a lot of people, if I'm honest, were deleted off the list, The list wasn't as long as it was in the first place. And I had, and I had these certain ideas of like, right, no, that person, I'm going to sit them down, I'm going to speak to them, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to email that person, I'm going to call that person. And a lot of it didn't actually work out the way that I had initially planned, And a lot of people, I remember my sponsor saying to me, I don't think you need to make a face-to-face amends to that person. And, I think it wouldn't be safe for you, or it wouldn't be safe for them. So a few people came off the list like that, and I made the amends to my sponsor. I'd written out the amends. I'd written people letters, and we spent the day me just reading him a lot of letters to people. And I'm so I've worked the steps once, I'm working the steps in another program, and I can sit here and say confidently I'm happy with the way that I worked my step 8, in that I thought it was going to be one thing, and then actually it turned out to be something quite different, and that's okay. I think the takeaway that I really want to share today, though, is just the importance of that, of putting myself at the top of that list, because I had no intention of doing that. I had no idea that I needed to be at the top of that list. It was brought to my attention by my sponsor, who's got a lot of recovery under his belt, and that was a real blessing. That was a real gift. And then, as I say, higher power, and getting that connection and that relationship to my higher power even stronger. It started with, it didn't necessarily start with making an amends, but making just an acknowledgement to higher power. Yeah, I think that is the takeaway for me. It didn't work out the way I planned. Perhaps there was an element of step 1 in it, me trying to control things, and then actually, on my sponsor's advice, just letting them play out, letting things play out, letting things be what they needed to be. And yeah, I feel like I don't know, I'm kind of careful about using the word fun, but this was one of the lighter, easier, more gentler steps for me. Once I had taken that approach, I got a real sense of relief when I realized that I could put myself at the top of that list, and that once I was able to make myself the amends, I would I would wholeheartedly be able to make those amends to other people. Because if I'm not able to make amends to myself, if I'm not able to give myself that, how can I give that to other people? Really, truly, honestly, you know, it would be doing me a disservice, and it would have been doing them a disservice. And, you know, I apply that in my life now. You know, if I need to make an amends to myself, I do. And if I need to make an amends to somebody else, I do, you know. Step 8, step 9, definitely a part of my everyday recovery, you know, trying to acknowledge where I get things wrong. I'm certainly not perfect. I get it wrong all of the time, but all I can do is try, you know, and realize, you know, oh, okay, maybe I need to make an amends there. You know, how can I do that? And the how is very important, because it's not always appropriate for me to make an amends in the way that I would want to. Some people don't want me to, or I may never have the chance. You know, I might be obnoxious to a stranger I'll never meet again, because I'm a human being and I can do that. You know, so it's like, well, you know, how's a way that I can make amends for that? You know, let me be nice to another person. Let me buy a stranger a coffee. You know, that sort of thing. So yeah, as I say, it was one of the gentler, sort of nicer steps that I experienced. You know, so yeah, I think I'm going to leave it there, guys. Thank you. Well, I think it's much easier now. I've got a bit of practice under my belt. But when I notice that self-critical voice come in, you know, if I find myself in a situation where, you know, I might be acting codependently, and, you know, that for me, that there's a rainbow of ways that I can do that, you know. And so the first thing is to catch it, you know, what's the codependency here? Secondly is to go, okay, that's fine, you know, it's okay, sir. You know, I'll give an example. Recently, you know, I've been going into sort of a bit of fantasy and a bit of obsession about a person and a relationship, someone I've only just met, you know, and that's one of my codependent sort of characteristics, is sort of cling on and want to make something and control a romantic relationship way before I should, really. You know, I should let things unfold on higher powers time. And, you know, so I'll catch the obsession, you know. And previously, what would happen is there would be a critical voice saying, well, why are you obsessing? Why are you fantasizing? You shouldn't be doing that. And now it's like, okay, you know, let me make amends. It's fine, sir. You know, you have this tendency, probably because you've got some, you know, unhealthy attachment styles. So, you know, you tend to latch onto people and fantasize and try to create safety in another person. And I know why you're doing what you're doing, but, you know, we know better now, sir. So, you know, it's okay. Maybe let's try and change the behavior. And, you know, I'm not going to berate you for it. That for me is sort of just making amends, and just using that compassionate voice, you know. And I think, having done my step 4, I mean, this is my own personal experience, obviously. I came out of step 4 not feeling particularly great about myself, because, I mean, just because that was my process and my journey. You know, I looked back at all the years and all the people and all the relationships and all the codependency, and I was like, oh God, there was a lot. And, you know, and I was being quite hard on myself, you know, and actually there was a lot of despair for the way I behaved up until that point. And I couldn't see a way out. I was stuck in a lot of despair for my past transgressions, or not even transgressions. I take that back. What I perceived to be transgressions, I don't perceive them to be transgressions now. But when I did my step 4 and I hadn't had enough recovery under my belt, I wasn't feeling particularly great about myself. And I think my sponsor picked up on that. And that's why he highlighted the importance of making the amends to myself first, so that I could go easy on myself and start to repair the relationship with myself. Because as I said in my chair, that, you know, I was fixated on repairing the relationship with other people. And now I realize that's really fine and noble. But if I don't have a healthy relationship with myself, then none of my relationships will be healthy. And so in order for me to have a healthy relationship with myself, I have to be self-forgiving and self-loving and, you know, self-compassionate. All the things that I want to offer somebody else, I have to be able to offer them to myself. Otherwise, I'm no good. I'm no good to myself and I'm no good to them. And an amends is part of that. So self-love is a part of that. Self-compassion is a part of that. And an amends is part of that. Being able to say, dude, I'm really sorry. Like, I'm sorry that we did that. I'm sorry that I lost my rag there. I'm sorry that I'm just sorry. And then, you know, being able to give and receive that to myself is really important, because if I can do it to myself and do it earnestly, then I can do it to other people. And now my relationships are by and far generally much, much healthier for that reason. I hope that makes sense.
Yes, is the short answer. If I'm completely honest, more so in step 4, I really, really struggled with step 4. And I felt a lot of what you just explained, you know, a lot of anxiety, a lot of stress. I avoided it like I owed it money. You know, it was difficult. So maybe the same sentiment, different step. But this is what my sponsor told me, and I hope this helps, is that, you know, yeah, it's difficult. Yeah, it causes anxiety, it causes stress, it causes depression. But what I had to remember, that it was a gift from higher power. So to be able to sit down in front of my green book with my pen and do my step 4 or do my step 8, every single one of these steps is a gift from higher power. And, you know, some gifts, they're not dressed up as gifts. They don't come in fancy boxes with nice ribbons. You know, they don't feel like it, but they are. And then I remember something else that my sponsor suggested that I do, which was, you know, turn it into a bit of a ritual. So for me, that was like, you know, I'd sit down with my step book, with the green workbook and a pen, and I'd light a candle and I'd say the Serenity Prayer. And if I found it too much as well, you know, what I would do is put a timer on it. So I'd be like, okay, I'm just going to do 5 minutes, something that's manageable, something that, you know, because previous to that, I would sit with the pen and the workbook and I'd just be like, oh, okay, I'll just do however long I can. Whereas actually giving it small, manageable chunks of time really helped. And just whatever works, you know, sort of like have a conversation with your higher power and see if there's a ritual that you can bring into your process. This is, you know, I think this goes for this, certainly for me and for anyone working a 12-step program. And the steps is, you know, these are gifts. Each one of these steps is a gift given to us by our higher powers. And it, like, as I say, it doesn't feel like that sometimes, but it is. And just remembering that, you know, it's a gift. And a lot of people won't have the miracle. They won't have the miracle of doing it. You know, I feel really lucky. I think anyone who is in a 12-step program is very, very fortunate. And so just remembering that and bringing that light into the process, I hope that can help you.
I'm Lynda. I'm codependent. And I was one of the first people on the events committee when it was started in 2017. And I served as the events chair for a while. And I did a couple of years of service with the committee, and then I stepped down. But I've run a bunch of these Zoom meetings. Some of you have probably seen me on Saturdays during the pandemic. We spent a lot of time together then, for sure. Um, so I'm happy to be here today to speak to you on step 8. Before I start specifically on step 8, I feel like it would be important to give just a little bit of my story, because not every codependent is the same. You know, there's lots of different patterns and characteristics, and we have, you know, a lot of them, but we don't all have the same ones. And I feel like depending on which kind of variety of codependent you are, you might view step 8 a little bit differently. Like for me, when I made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all, I honestly was like, I haven't harmed really hardly anybody. You know, like I'm such a people pleaser that I couldn't see where I was doing harm. And in working the steps and being in CODA, I took a long look at why I am the way I am, how I got to be this way. And I would encourage you all to do the same, because understanding how those patterns and characteristics developed really helped me with the light bulb going off of understanding, oh my gosh, now I get why I do the things I do, why I feel the way I feel, why I suddenly will get a rush of feelings and not even realize where they're coming from. It's like, why is that upsetting me? And so much of it can be traced back to childhood. So I'm going to give you just a little snapshot of how I got to be codependent, and then I'll go into step 8 and what that looks like for me anyway, because I suspect that there are many people on the Zoom call who are the similar variety of codependent that I am. So as a child, like from the outside looking in, I had a great family. I had a great childhood. My dad, you know, made decent money. We had a beautiful house. My parents stayed married their whole lives. We went on family vacations every year. I have a younger sister. Everything looks great, right? Where I feel a lot of my codependency came from is that my parents were very ill. My dad was diabetic from when he was 16 years old, and my mom was diagnosed with lupus in her early 40s. So she was sick a lot. She was in bed a lot. And so I was often put into the role of caretaker. So when my mom was sick, I'd be making dinner and cleaning the house and taking care of things. And my dad was the kind of dad that didn't know how to do anything. Like he couldn't run the microwave. He couldn't cook for himself. My mom was a stay-at-home mom, so she did everything. So I became overly responsible at a very young age. And I also developed at a very young age like a fear of abandonment, because I thought my parents were going to die. And it was a real possibility for my whole life. Because with lupus, like it can attack your internal organs, and you know, that's it. And with my dad, with his diabetes, it was uncontrolled. He had other issues. He had heart problems. So my childhood was spent worrying about my parents and taking care of my parents and trying to take care of my younger sister and being very overly responsible and being the caretaker. On top of that, the dynamic between my parents was not healthy. My dad was very quiet. He got bossed around. He did whatever my mom said. And my mom was a rager. A little bit in her defense, back in the day, in the treatment of lupus, they gave her a lot of steroids. So I feel like maybe some of it was like roid rage, but I learned how to be a quiet little mouse You know, I did not make any waves. I tried very hard to fly under the radar because I didn't want to do something that was going to provoke rage and throwing things and, you know, all of that. In later on in life, I found out from a therapist that people who grew up in that type of an environment show the same signs as adult children of alcoholics, because your childhood is so chaotic that you don't feel safe. I definitely did not feel safe. I felt loved to a degree, but I wasn't really allowed to be myself. I had to fit the mold, you know, and so I fit the mold, man. I was a Girl Scout, I was a straight A student, I never made a peep, I never got in trouble, and I became an expert people pleaser. I was reading an article the other day, and it had a phrase that stuck out to me, and it was talking about, you know, how we develop in childhood, and the phrase was overactive empathy. So the article was about our survival mechanisms that we develop, and as a child I learned how to tune in very closely to my mother's mood. Like, I would proactively be looking for signs that she was getting annoyed or angry, and I would rush around and try to fix it so she wouldn't explode, you know? And so this overactive empathy really developed, to the point where I'm hyper vigilant about other people's feelings. I don't even know what my own feelings are half the time, because my feelings never mattered. My feelings, like, they were non-existent, because my survival depended on my mother's feelings, making sure she was okay, making sure she was happy, making sure her needs were met. And that's how I grew up. And so as an adult, those tendencies and traits, characteristics, were very deeply ingrained. And so I was always a people pleaser, but I then started to become a rescuer, where if people had problems, I was drawn to them because I knew how to do that. I knew how to be hypervigilant of their feelings. I knew how to caretake. I knew how to people please. And so my adult relationships have mostly been based on that. And even in a professional setting, I have a giant fear of screwing up. Right out of college, I was a teacher, and I was an art teacher. So, you know, the kids would come to art class and it was fun time. So sometimes they'd be bouncing off the walls, you know, and I was, you know, at 22 years old, they put you in a room with 25 little kids and they just expect you to know what you're doing. And so I got up there like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm the teacher. You know, first of all, it's a weird feeling. So anyway, I started teaching in September, and the superintendent of schools came into my classroom on Halloween, and the kids are all in their costumes and they're doing their projects, and they had a lot of candy. So they're like rowdy. And I didn't know how to control them because, of course, I was also too nice, you know, and I loved the kids and I was super nice to the kids. So anyway, the superintendent of schools had to write up an evaluation. And what he wrote was, I see a young teacher who doesn't have control of her classroom. Okay, totally factual statement, right? So he comes in to sit down with me to go over the evaluation, and it's on paper, you know. I literally burst into tears. Like, I couldn't handle the criticism. I felt like I failed. I felt like I was no good. Like, now looking back on it, it was completely unprofessional to have a meltdown during a professional review, you know. But at that point, I didn't have any control over that. It was childhood stuff coming up where, you know, I wasn't good enough and my mommy was yelling at me. And that kind of thing persisted throughout early adulthood, where I was just still trying to make everybody happy, trying to make everybody like me, being a people pleaser, trying to just excel at everything I did, and really beating myself up horribly if I fell short. And I got into Coda after getting into a relationship with an addict and an alcoholic, who was clean and sober when I got into the relationship, but then, had a series of relapses. And I was right there trying to fix and trying to run his recovery and tell him what to do. And when I had like 2 different rounds of Coda. So the first round of Coda consisted of me going to meetings every week, telling my story and crying. And my story was all about him. He did this, he did that, blah, 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 him. Everything was about him. I don't think I probably ever spoke about my own feelings because they didn't matter, And I didn't make any progress because I didn't get a sponsor. I didn't work the steps, and I just cried a lot. The second time I got into Coda, it was different because I really decided that I needed help. And so I got a sponsor, I worked the steps, I joined the events committee, and I really threw myself into doing the work. And it has made a gigantic difference, really a miraculous difference in my life. And so I encourage you to make sure that you're not just coming to meetings, that you get a sponsor, you work the steps, and you keep it focused on you. So when I got to step 8, I thought about it, and I'm like, I haven't really done anything to anybody. Like, I haven't overtly harmed anyone, because all I ever tried to do is love them to death, like just smother them with love and help them. And that was my whole mission in life, was helping other people. And I had completely abandoned myself. And then when you read step 8, it talks about the following maybe ways we harmed others and ourselves. And so in reading this, it started to click a little bit. So some of the points that are in the workbook is holding resentments, acting out, fearing intimacy, manipulating others, needing to be right, cheating, lying, and stealing, obsessing or worrying. I have my PhD in that. Blaming and judging others, emotionally abusing ourselves or others, physically abusing ourselves or others, neglecting our responsibilities, creating financial stress, abandoning ourselves, and separating from our spiritual selves. So that started to make a little bit of sense to me. And my sponsor really had an uphill battle in getting me to take the focus off the other person and put the focus on myself. And she told me to take a Post-it note and write, "I am the problem," and put it on my mirror. And I mean, I did it, but it was weird, because I'm like, I'm not the problem, I'm the victim. Like, all I do is go around trying to help people and love people. And I can't tell you how many times I've had meltdowns where I'd be laying in bed crying, like literally crying my heart out, that I don't understand. I treat everybody so good. I love everybody. I love this person, and I've done everything for him. And this is how it always ends up. They don't love me enough, and I'm not good enough. And like the whole pity party that makes me really sick thinking about it right now. So I couldn't see that I was the problem, and I couldn't see that I had done anyone harm. But then when I started looking at it, I realized that the person that I had to make the most amends to was myself, because I had really, really, truly hurt myself by pursuing relationships with people that were unavailable emotionally, pursuing relationships with people that couldn't reciprocate at the level that I can, because of their own trauma or their own addictions or their own mental health issues. Like, these are the partners that I selected over and over again, not consciously, but from your subconscious programming. And your whole way of life is being a people pleaser and a rescuer. This is who you're going to attract. This is who you're going to be attracted to, you know. So in looking at step 8, I really had to forgive myself for doing that, for putting myself through the agony of chasing after people who weren't ready, willing, and able to give what I wanted from them. And I caused harm by begging people for attention and love and commitment and chasing after them and having like emotional meltdowns over it, and just like trying to understand what I was doing wrong. And it wasn't, I mean, yes, I was doing a lot wrong, but it wasn't really because of that. It's like, I just said this to somebody the other day. It's like I selected an orange and I'm trying to get lemon juice. Like, it's not going to happen no matter how hard you try. I actually said it to my therapist and I said, I feel like, I want an orange and I picked a lemon. And she said, the person you picked isn't even a lemon. He's a car. Like, you're not even in the same family of who you're trying to have a relationship with, But what I kept getting hung up on was like the whole unconditional love thing. So this article that I was reading said that focusing on someone else keeps us from examining our own pain. And so saying, but I love this person and I don't care that they have issues, I love them unconditionally, is a really easy way to get out of having to take a look at your own pain and the fact that, yeah, you do love this person and you do love them unconditionally and you'll do anything for them, but you're suffering in this relationship because you're not getting your needs met. I'm not getting my needs met. I'm not getting the emotional support that I need. I'm not getting the partnership that I need because I'm choosing someone who's not an equal partner. And there's a reason that that's in some of our readings in the beginning. When you're codependent, you don't always pick people that are healthy for you. And so in step 8, the person that I harmed the most, honestly, I think was myself. I've done a lot of damage to myself over decades. And at first I couldn't even see it. You just don't even realize. And then when I started to realize, I started to make better choices. I really started to set boundaries. Now it feels icky when somebody mistreats me, and I will speak up about it rather than just try harder. Like, I would just try harder because it was always my fault if things weren't going well. Now I'm much more honest with myself. And I've been able to make amends to myself by trying to eliminate toxic people from my life, and some of them are my own family members. And it's not easy when it's your family. But I've had to set very strict boundaries to protect myself and to protect my peace and my own serenity. And then with the people that I have harmed, what I have come to realize is that I have been a class A enabler. Like, I will fix, rescue, do anything for somebody, and I'm not giving them the grace to face the consequences of their actions because I always have the safety net ready. So I have actually, I feel, impeded the growth of some of my past romantic partners, of some of my friends, by constantly rescuing. Like, you have to trust that that people in your life, I have to trust that people in my life have the ability to take care of themselves. And I always thought I knew better than them. you know, because it's obvious what they're doing wrong, you know, it's so obvious in other people and it's so not obvious when it's you. It's insidious. Like I look back on things that I've done over the past couple of months and I'm like, wow, I just let that slide and I let that slide and I can rationalize stuff in my own head. And so you really have to be very, very vigilant of your own behavior, thoughts, feelings, and actions because this codependency can sneak up on you. But by being overly responsible for other people's feelings, and I am the queen of unsolicited advice. I'm really trying to be more vigilant about that. I've tried to detach quite a bit, and interesting things happen when you do that. People in my family have told me I'm selfish because suddenly the rescuer doesn't want to rescue. You know, so I'm like, well, I'm sure you'll figure that out. They're like, you're not going to help me? I'm like, I'm sorry, I have my own things to take care of. Well, when did you become so selfish? You know, expect that because it happens. And that means you're on the right track. That's how I'm looking at it. Like, oh my gosh, I'm on the right track. Like, finally, I matter. Finally, my time matters. My emotional stability matters. You know, my peace matters. Because all I would do is spend every minute of every day trying to make my boss happy, trying to make my partner happy, trying to make my family happy, trying to make my friends happy. Nobody was trying to make me happy, you know, and I'm not even trying to make me happy. So the self-abandonment was huge. So now, as part of my own amends to myself, I'm trying to treat myself really well. Like I'll take a day and just give the day to myself without having to do anything. I can take the dogs for a walk and sit under a tree and listen to the birds, you know. I can buy really nice soap, which is something I just did, and it smells so great. And I'm like, why have I not been doing this? You know, now I'm like, I want to buy myself some really nice sheets because why not? You know, like I never really treated myself to really nice things just because I deserve it, because I'm worth it, you know, that kind of thing. And then with the people around me, the way that I've harmed them is by rescuing and caretaking to an excessive degree and not allowing them to take care of themselves, not allowing them to develop the skills to take care of themselves, to acknowledge their own feelings and figure out how to deal with them without me rushing in to try to make them feel better. You know, without handling things that they're perfectly capable of handling for themselves. And you develop patterns where the person that you're codependent with just automatically assumes that you're going to do these things for them. And again, when you say, I'm sorry, you're going to need to do that for yourself, you know, I got the side eye and like, what do you mean you're not going to do that for me? All right, I guess I got to do it myself. Yeah, because you're a grown-ass man and you should be doing it yourself, you know? And it's an adjustment. It really is an adjustment, but it's good. And I have to allow people to face the consequences of their own actions because how else are they going to learn? How are they going to grow? So I feel like I've stifled people's growth opportunities by standing in the way of their own recovery. And that's pretty big. So while I sit here thinking I'm like this perfect little people pleaser, I wasn't even aware of the damage that I was doing by trying so hard to protect someone else, trying so hard to take care of their feelings. I was actually doing harm. And that was really eye-opening. So now, I am very aware of the actions that I'm taking, and I'm being very careful to make sure that it's a choice and that I'm just not on codependent autopilot, you know, where something happens to someone and I rush right in and fix it. Now I'm like, wow, that's horrible. And then I just, you know, it's okay to end the sentence there. You don't even have to say, what can I do to help? Depending on the situation, I may or may not, or let me know if you need any help or whatever. But I don't rush in and just instantly start doing for that person. You know, I wait to be asked, and then I weigh whether I'm just being helpful because I care about this person, or whether it's veering into codependency. So I'm really monitoring my own responses. And I'm not just reacting, like instantly jumping in. I pause and I think and I decide. And I also decide, do I have the bandwidth to do this? Do I have the emotional bandwidth? Do I have the time? Do I have the energy? Is this a positive, healthy thing that I'm about to do? Or is this impeding somebody's progress? Is this codependent? Is it rescuing? Is it caretaking? I actually now have like a mental checklist to make sure that I'm not behaving codependently, and that I'm not putting myself second, and that I'm not rescuing. And it takes a lot of practice, and it takes a lot of awareness. I feel like it's so easy to not be aware because you're just trying to get through the day, and you've got your to-do list and your work and all this, and suddenly, before you know it, you're behaving codependently because you weren't paying attention. So now I'm really trying to pay attention. The other thing that I've done that's been helpful is when feelings come up, I actually try to sit with it for a minute and say, where is this feeling coming from? Is this coming from the present, or is this feeling based in the past? Is this just codependency? And I actually had a little bit of a I don't want to say crisis, but I am going through a breakup, and it was very sudden. And you know, all the old feelings started rushing back, like, I'm not good enough. Oh my God, I can't believe this is happening. Let me try to fix this. Let me try to stop this breakup from happening. You know, and that was my initial reaction based on the past. And then I sat there and I literally just started saying to myself, this isn't you, this is codependency. This isn't you, this is codependency. Like, I had to separate the feeling from reality and understand that this was all old fear of abandonment stuff that was coming up, and that the reality was that I wasn't actually all that upset about the breakup. Like, I was upset, but I could see that there would be positives to it. I could see why it was happening, and I wasn't trying to fight it. Like, there was a couple of, I would say, I was just trying to understand it more than fight it. But, you know, my initial reaction was to try to hang on to this relationship even though it was dysfunctional. And that's another thing that codependents do, is we cling to things because they're familiar, because we're afraid of change. You know, and this time I really had to take a hard look at it and say, I don't want to do that because it's not healthy for me. And I have to make amends to myself and not go down that road again. And also, if this person feels like this is best for him, who am I to say it's not? Like, it's not my job to try to manipulate or rescue or caretake him into not making this big mistake of breaking up with me, which is obviously a mistake. But no, it really needs to happen for both of our sanities. But initially it was a tough pill to swallow, but then I really took a look at it, and I think he's shocked because I started like packing up some of his stuff, and past me would have been like literally hanging on his leg as he was trying to walk out the door, going, please don't leave me, you know, all that crap. Now I'm like, when can you come get your stuff? Because I'm reorganizing and I'm setting up my desk over here. And like, I could see the look on his face is like, what the heck? Like, this is different. And I was very proud of myself, and I'm proud of myself for letting him have his own experience and his own recovery. And if, you know, if someone is making choices, and this is not about the breakup now, but if somebody's making choices that I don't think are the best choice for them, it's not my business to say that. It's their business to figure that out themselves. So sometimes people, and there's other people in my life who just seem to be hell-bent on their own self-destruction, and I've given what I could give in terms of when I'm asked for advice, I'll give my best advice and guidance and say what worked for me. And then I just have to step back. And if they don't take it, they don't take it. And if there are people that are around us that are hell-bent on their own self-destruction, no matter what we do, no matter how much we try to caretake and rescue, we cannot stop them from destroying themselves. And that's something that I had to learn, because I just thought if I loved them enough, they wouldn't self-destruct. And it really has nothing to do with me, and it has nothing to do with how much I love them or what I do for them. It's an inside job, and they say that in the program for a reason. I can't control, manipulate, caretake anybody into doing the right thing or what I think is the right thing. Maybe they need to really blow up their own lives in order to change. And me stopping them from blowing up their own lives is keeping them sick for many more years to come. And that was a really big lesson too. So now, today, I'm just like, okay, if that's what you think is best. And then I worry about myself, because that's all I can control is myself. So my amends to the people around me is to stay out of their business, to detach with love, to mentally wish them only good things in their life, and then let them go to make their own choices, because it's not on me to kind of inflict my opinions and my point of view and my advice on them. And it usually backfires, and I'm the one who gets hurt. So in a way, it's also making amends to myself, because it's extremely disappointing when you're trying so hard to help somebody and it doesn't help anyway, and then it hurts. So if I can separate myself out from other people, it's an amends to them, and it's an amends to me, because that enmeshment and codependency is not healthy for me or the other person. So I make a conscious effort not to obsess and worry about people. I understand that a lot of things are out of my control, and so I let go. I let go with love, and it's hard. It's not an easy thing. Sometimes I have to do it 3 times a day, just go, okay, you gotta let this go. Okay, this isn't in your control. Okay, what's best for you here? What's best for you has never been in my vocabulary until recently. What was best for me was never even part of the equation. So that's one of my amends to myself, is now I get to ask, what's best for me in this situation? What's the healthiest, best thing I can do for myself today? What's the healthiest, best thing that I can do for this other person? And often, very often, it's get out of their way, leave them alone, just let them be. Stop trying to, be the puppet master on other people just because you think you know better. And that's me. I mean, I hate to say it, this needing to be right, it's not really conscious. It's not like an arrogant thing. It's just like, it's like a subconscious thing where I kind of feel like I know better than other people. And it's not good. I have to give some thought to where that comes from, because I also, the flip side of that is I struggle with insecurity sometimes. Like, I wrote an email for work the other day, and I just started a new job, and I read it like 5-6 times before I hit send, because I was so afraid of making a mistake. And then finally I was like, you just got to trust that you know what you're doing. And I hit send, and my boss sent back, that was an awesome email. And I'm like, great, So it's a flip side, because sometimes, like, I think I'm right when it comes to other people, but I'm so insecure about myself and my own life and my own abilities. So it's really a strange thing to wrestle with. But anyway, so, going back to step 8, making a list of all the persons we had harmed, you definitely include yourself, and definitely include people that you don't see that you harm them. Like, look at it and just look at it. Is there a way that I harmed this person by loving them too much, by doing too much? Because that's kind of covert. Like, when you've really done something horrible to somebody, it, and it's overt. It's right there. Everybody knows it. You were just, a major ass to that person, or whatever you did is obvious. The covert stuff is where it's not obvious, and you really have to be paying attention and looking for it. So I try very hard today, and it is difficult because sometimes I do feel selfish. Like, I try very hard to stay out of other people's business and stay in my own lane, focus on myself, give myself some grace, and just say, you know what, it's okay to turn off my phone, because I don't want to get these texts from my family about this one said this to this one, and this one did this, and what should I do about that? I deserve a couple of hours of being off the clock on that, so I will just turn my phone off and just do something good for myself. And that's a new thing too, just make a list. Sometimes I make a list of things that make me smile, so that when I start feeling down and I start going off into that direction of, being in a dark place, I kind of have my list of go-tos of what's good for me. What's a kind, loving thing I can do for myself? What do I enjoy? For a long time, I didn't even know what I enjoyed, because I was so busy doing what I didn't enjoy because other people like to do it and it made them happy, So I had to really get in touch with, what do I like to do? How do I want to spend my time? And I go to my list, and it could be a bubble bath, it could be binge watching Netflix, it could be drawing or painting or making something, it could be helping animals, because that's kind of where I channel my rescuing behavior now. Is I volunteer with animals, and to me that's healthy. That's a healthy outlet for my caretaking. And I look at, how can I best make amends to myself? And by making those types of amends to myself, it's also making amends to the people that I was manipulating and controlling and obsessing over and worrying about. So the difference between today and when I first got into Coda is, to me, monumental. Like, I still see traces of that person that used to be, but the growth has just been amazing. And mentally, I feel so much better and stronger. Like, this breakup that I'm going through in the past, it would have been like a 3-month pity party and crying and making myself sick and not being able to function. And like, it would have been bad. And this time around, it was literally just a couple of days of feeling like, ugh. And then I was like, okay, what's the future going to look like? What do you want to create for yourself? Let's refocus. This is another technique that I do. I put fun things into my future. I planned something really fun a month from now, and then I have something to look forward to. I start thinking long term. I start planning vacations. Like, I'm going to Costa Rica. I don't know when I'm going, where I'm going, but I'm doing my homework on Costa Rica. And that makes, just looking at the pictures makes me happy. So I'm treating myself good. I'm putting fun things in my future. I'm getting out of other people's business. I'm taking care of myself. I'm spending time with friends. I'm really doing self-care, which has been a long time coming. But it feels good and it feels healthy. And I really feel like the people around me are adjusting. I've noticed that people are leaning on me less. Like they know I'm here if they really need me, but I'm not getting the daily texts of my husband said this to me and he's such a jerk. Like the constant negative chatter from my family. Oh, it's so nice that it's mostly gone. It's so nice because they know that I'm not really going to engage anymore. Where I would jump right into that. I would jump right into that toxic pool of yuckiness, you know. Now I'm just like, I don't, that's not what I want in my life. You have to set the boundaries. And boundaries is probably the biggest lesson I've learned in Coda. And that has really benefited me. So I think that's all I have on step 8. I know we're a little bit out of time, and I did want to leave a little time at the end if people have questions or want to share their own experiences. So with that, I'm going to say thank you so much for being here and pass it back over to